Welcome to Securing the Legal Industry with SharePoint, another Fpwebinar in Fpweb.net's short, to-the-point webinar series that provides an overview and some insight into your cloud and SharePoint concerns. Feel free to take a look at any of our past webinars online excuse me, and share with your friends what you think they may find interesting. And remember, when we finish the webinar and you exit your screen, please fill out the survey that pops up because it will dictate what subject matter we cover next. Also, one lucky attendee will win a copy of Microsoft Windows 8 Pro software, and all you have to do to win is be present throughout the entire broadcast. Today is a special webinar because we're joined by our partners at Accusoft to discuss e-discovery and streamlining collaboration in the legal industry. We're going to take a look at the different aspects of rights management, document security, collaboration, and more when dealing with sensitive information. My name is Jill Kunkel, and I work with our partners here just to really ensure that our SharePoint customers are getting the most out of their SharePoint deployment. So we work with a lot of third-party vendors that help you extend and use SharePoint to its fullest capabilities. And then today we've got Pete Newfer. He is our friend and partner over at Accusoft, who will be driving the webinar. He focuses most on viewing technologies over at Accusoft. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Pete at this time.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today for the webinar. We're really excited to be doing this today with Fpweb and having the opportunity to meet with all of you. So the topic today that we've chosen to discuss is addressing security and document management really along the lines of working within the legal industry, e-discovery. As many of you are well aware, paperless initiatives have really taken over in this particular field. Back in the day when we had rooms full of file boxes and sorting through the information, a lot of that was great and it worked well enough, but nowadays many states now, Arizona, Utah actually just finalized this as well, and many other states are now all moving to digital mediums. As a matter of fact, when you prepare for a case or a hearing these days, very often they require you to submit the information in digital format. So it just makes sense that, again, your internal storage mechanisms would be digital as well. There's been a lot of progress made in that area. Capture of information using technologies like EasyScan, where you can scan and bring information in, get it into the system, and then of course you've got in SharePoint a great repository, a great foundation to build on in terms of building out a repository for your case management system. Now, along with new technologies, just like the older file boxes in the day, we have our own challenges dealing with digital security and digital content, especially within SharePoint. SharePoint itself is a great platform to build upon, but very often to extend out and get the level of functionality that you need to start looking beyond just that foundation and augmenting and extending functionality. So some of the first challenges you see when you're bringing in your document sets and your case management system into a digital environment like SharePoint are compliance, information security, document formats. Of course, you need to be able to search the information where recognition technologies can come in. And you want to make it really easy and intuitive to use. Again, you want buy-in from your user community, from your paralegals, from your clerks, even from your attorneys. You've got to make it an intuitive system that's very easy to bring up, very quick to access that information set in. So even with all those challenges, again, that is very often you look at those challenges we have, and it drives you towards certain platforms. That's really where SharePoint has started to get a lot of recognition in the legal industry and e-discovery industry in terms of being a great platform to build on. It's centralized, right? So everybody can get to it, again, depending on how you have it set up, and certainly if it's a private cloud hosting type setup, you can get to it from anywhere where you have a data connection. It's web accessible, so again, that universal access, being able to go in and access it, again, from anywhere is great. And it's search enabled. The latest iteration of SharePoint 2013 incorporated in the fast search technology, and Microsoft has continually built that. It's really one of the most powerful features available in SharePoint out of the box, is the ability to search and have that index of the entire content of your repository. Now, of course, that being said, with SharePoint and with any ECM system, enterprise content management system, you're going to have to perform a bit of a balancing act. We've got a lot of stakeholders in an implementation like this. We have our users, and then, of course, we have our administrators and our owners. And SharePoint out of the box, when we talk about balancing those desires and requirements and expectations from these communities, can be challenging to properly find the right symbiosis balance between the two. So let's talk a little bit about some of those areas and how they can conflict, and even how they can be complementary to each other and be universal in the direction they want to go. So very often from the user community, again, I want something that is easy. I want it to just be intuitive. I want to go out, and if I want to access information on an iPad, darn it, I want to be able to bring it up on my iPad. I want to be able to go in and annotate, put some notes against for an upcoming hearing that I have. And I want those annotations to be centralized. I want them to be referenceable other places. I want to be able to bring it up very easily, again, on my Android device if that's where I happen to be working. Now, from the administration side and the ownership side, we've got to be very careful with this information. Most of the time when we're dealing with litigation or we're dealing with discovery cases, even if we're dealing with things like mergers and acquisitions, there's a lot of confidential information out there. And the security model in SharePoint out of the box is great for addressing some things about that, document libraries in certain parts, but the documents itself can be a little challenging, so that needs to be balanced out. We want to make it easy as a SharePoint administrator or as a business owner or a partner in a law firm, but we've also got to make sure we're protecting this content. Again, on the user side, I really want my access, again, to be fast, and the last thing I want to do is if I'm looking at an important document, I do not want to have to hunt around on the App Store or the Google Play Store to find the right application that can bring this particular format up and be able to reference it. Now, and again, from the administration side and the partner side, the ownership side, we're correctly aligned with users in that sense, because we don't want you to have to look for an application, nor do we want to pay for it, for that matter. And we also don't want to have to maintain that. With bring your own device today, it becomes kind of a question. Well, do I pay for that or you? It's your Android phone, you know. So again, that's a challenge. And of course, I've mentioned iPads, mobile devices. Users today want to be able to do their work mobile. They want to be able to bring it up, access it very quickly, again, wherever they happen to be working. And in today's business environment, mobile is a reality. It has to be addressed. And so from the administration side, again, we also want to open up mobile use. We see the value in it, but we also want to make sure we're not exposing ourselves to undue risk and that it's being secured properly. So let's talk about a case study, particularly a firm that we were working with on a project for case management. So in this particular area, a company was working with, let's see, I've got some fun information here. Okay, sorry about that little PowerPoint malfunction there. So in this particular situation, a company wanted to build out a case management system. Pretty standard request. When we have the original matter documents come in, they needed to have some workflow assigned. They wanted a centralized place to track all of the key players related to a particular case. They wanted to track deliverable dates, like when the next hearing was, when the request to produce needed to be actually delivered, when we needed to do prep, if there was any redactions to be performed on content that we were going to submit with the request to produce. We wanted to have, again, a workflow that would establish that. SharePoint took us quite a way in terms of accomplishing a good deal of those requirements. But we had an outstanding problem. Securing the SharePoint site, getting the document library set up, the actual process of going in and establishing those lists, that was a standard setup. right? But the documents continue to be a weak point in this. The documents had to be secured, and certain content within the documents had to be removed before those requests to produce were fulfilled. Um, in this case, we looked at there were a few different options that were evaluated in terms of how this was going to be approached. And of course, one of the first things you look at when you're dealing with SharePoint is Office Web Apps and Rights Management Server. They're both great products, and for certain situations, they're going to work very, very well. However, in this use case, the complexity that would have gone into the administration piece of it, just from managing the site, we're talking about an office administrator that would go in and do this, or an IT manager that would be managing security permissions, the complexity would have been just through the roof in terms of how to deal with this. The other component of this particular combination of technologies is it only addresses Office documents and PDF files. And again, only if you have the Foxit PDF reader in that case. And again, we didn't really have in that particular scenario the ability to go in and control and internal content of the documents. So redactions and redacted renditions of the documents were going to be very problematic in this case. So what we did was bring into focus several different solutions and extensions outside of where we fell within the basic SharePoint implementation. And that's what we're going to show you today, basically in practice in terms of how we accomplish that. So bear with me while I toggle screens here really quickly. And here we should be able to see my virtual machine here that I've got SharePoint running on, a pretty accurate representation of what we were doing here with this particular client. So in this case, here we've got our basic case management, in this case a subsite of a broader site collection. In this case, and this is a fictitious case, obviously we set up for the city of Springfield versus Mos Eisley. Let me get out of that preview really quick. Sorry, that just jumped around. SharePoint expert I may be, PowerPoint is a little different. So, all right, continuing on. So we have our typical things that we'd expect to see in a case management system here. We set up cast of characters list that we could pull from a centralized location, team members that we were bringing in from a separate database, and everything along those lines, just basically to establish who was working on it, deliverables coming up, a typical calendar list. And then we had a repository where, using a technology like, say, EasyScan, for example, we were able to come in, capture all the paperment records, do OCR recognition, do intelligent form recognition, and dump it into a centralized repository in this case. So again, the security of the documents and the redaction process was going to be a challenge in this situation. And of course, they also had other requirements, like, hey, we want our attorneys to be able to bring it up in a mobile environment. So in this case, we implemented a document viewing platform, Prism Content Connect, that allowed for bringing in and very quickly bringing up any type of file format in HTML5. So on any device, we get the same user interface. This is an Excel file we're looking at here, and able to load it up very quickly. In this case, I'm on my desktop computer, but again, the same functionality would translate directly over to mobile platforms in those cases. And this goes for any file format. One of the reasons that this client really liked working with this viewing technology is because even formats like DICOM medical images, in this case for the workers' compensation case they're working on, they needed to go in and look at certain x-ray slides. They got those directly, which wrong page number, directly from the doctor's office, and were able to come in and just very quickly, again, on any device, come in, view it up. It's all very high fidelity, very quick response, and they're able to go in and work with it. You can see here I'm logged on, in this case, as administrator, who's a higher privilege user. But one of the things that they needed to do is, as information was dumped in here, obviously there's a review process, that discovery process that goes on. And part of that is, in this case, they wanted to also facilitate very quickly getting ready for these RTP responses that they would have as part of the litigation process. So what they wanted to do is effectively have an employee, either a paralegal or even the attorney themselves, in this case, would come in and they'd look through documents. They'd want to be able to very quickly discover, all right, where do we have any kind of anything that we need to protect before submitting in this case. They'd come in this case, they'd use the viewer search capability, come in, and they were able to do things like pattern matching searching, for example. They can very quickly look for social security numbers, for example. Once those were established, they were able to go in, maybe put some commentary that would not be necessarily public or part of it, but go in and store that information by putting in some notes around it, and these are all stored as an XML overlay, right? So they're not actually burned into the document, but then they can also come in and redact it. And in this case, the annotations or the redactions, these overlay components that we're drawing in this case, are all being saved into a column inside the document library. So what that means is, if you look here, if I go ahead and close out of this, I've saved those now. In this case, you can see this 401k projection. Again, let's assume in this case there was also some question over compensation and contributions to this. General workers' comp probably would come up, but still. So in this case, and I've left this manual just to kind of highlight, you can see our black line status in this case is set to review. In their case, they had automated this workflow, but we'll go ahead and kick it off manually. Go ahead and start this up against this document. And what's going to happen is you can see at that point, because we went in and we annotated that document, we put a markup over it, and because that redaction XML actually contains the name redact, it says, hey, there's a redaction in here. It's ready to be submitted for approval for final processing as part of this RFP. At that point, another individual can come in, oops, excuse me, hit the wrong area, look at it, open up those redactions that they're working with, validate that it is in fact redacted. And again, these are annotations. This is redaction, so that's all that would be burned in at this point. And they were able to come in and convert that to PDF. Again, I mentioned earlier the big push toward digital records when we're submitting into a lot of these courts. Format standardization is not a bad thing to have, and of course this can also be called out via workflow in this case. So they would go ahead and push that redaction out. We'll go ahead and include the redactions in this case. And then they would have a workflow basically pick that up. This will be a redacted rendition of the document. Set the black line status to redacted. We'll call this 401k redact. Redacted. It's a little off, sorry. And click Save. And then in this redacted version, now in their case, what they would do is they would actually pick this up and workflow would actually move it directly over to this area based on the value of that metadata tag. And when that happens, of course, at that point, in this case, this is not the same document. Let me go back to the original one. The information is redacted. And at this point, you can see that black line just comes right up there. Now, important caveat here, it's still a searchable document, so I can look for Mo, right, in this case. But if I were to come back in and look for social security numbers, just that section of the document's been rasterized. So again, we were able to preserve the taxonomy, preserve the ability to perform searches and that great indexing capability natively that they needed as well. So the internal content of the document was protected. Now, the second part of this, of course, was they needed to have security for certain groups of users to ensure that information did not leave the site. And that's where they were looking at Information Rights Management Server, or IRM, rights management on the Microsoft side for just Office documents. In our case, what we ended up doing, and we've got a rights management component as part of this particular technology, and we use the same security constructs that are already there. So groups, it operates off of the principles of inheritance, just like native SharePoint security does. And in this case, we can come over here, for example, look at the RTP response library, which we've given access to. And we can do things like control how the viewer behaves for a certain group of users. In this case, we can come in and say, look, don't allow them, enable DRM, but do not allow them to print, or give them access to annotations, but not redactions. And so how that materializes is, in the case of a member of that limited security group, they can come in, and for the libraries they've been granted access permissions on, when they click on a document, they are automatically redirected into the viewer. They also lose the ability to print. They lose the ability to select text. Not only that, if they come in and try and download files, this technology actually blocks them from doing that. So it's effectively getting everything locked into the web browser, into the document library, yet still, although we're locking them in and limiting some of the functionality and editing they can do in native applications, and thus preserving the integrity of our document set for the RTP, they can still collaborate. So they can still come in here and provide some annotations, maybe highlight a section of text, and ask any questions that they may have. Even run it through an approval process, and again, route it through further steps of workflow. But it is the content itself is going to be protected. It's going to be locked down in that case. So you can see there's a lot that can be done there, and this is just a really brief high-level sampling of some of the things that can be done with this and other technologies out there. So one thing I would like to really quickly talk on is just recap really quickly kind of what we saw today. So again, you know, the need was a secure collaboration portal, universal, no headache access from any device, and most importantly, very, very easy administration. They wanted to be sure that they stayed working in the legal business and not did not have to suddenly become SharePoint and Microsoft technology experts in extending out functionality in that regard. So that's, again, very quick highlight.